It's a Monday edition of Locked On Grizzlies. I am back with you, Joe Mullinax. I'm back with Damichael Cole. So excited to talk about Grizzlies basketball, sort of officially being back tonight. Open practice this past weekend, all the fun that Damichael had, all the dancing and joy and happiness and internet rumors about potential Marcus Smart trades with the New York Knicks that almost certainly aren't going to happen. It's a loaded Monday edition of Locked On Grizzlies. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you so much for being with us on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. I am happy to have you here, and I'm happy to have Damichael Cole with me. It is Joe Mullinax, Damichael Cole co-hosting after a couple of shows of Damichael solo while he was in Nashville, Locked On Grizzlies. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by the good folks over at FanDuel. You can do some pretty fun things as the season begins with a big return over at FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Here at Locked On Grizzlies, we are free and available wherever you get podcasts, as we are proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every single day. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe, Apple, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, literally anywhere you can get a podcast. I don't know if you've checked our subscriber numbers lately, Damichael, but we are roughly 40 away from 4,000 on YouTube. Thanks to everybody who checks us out there in the visual side of the podcast. Again, like, comment, rate, review, subscribe, wherever you get podcasts. Be an everydayer. The season is here. Basketball is kind of being played tonight. We'll talk about that and then some here on Locked On Grizzlies and so much more each and every day. You should be an everydayer every time an episode drops. Damichael, I loved your solo shows. Lots of great insights on what was happening there in Nashville. I'm sure what happens in Nashville stays in Nashville, right? They don't call it Nash Vegas for nothing.
That's what they call it.
Or maybe they don't call it that, and I just made that up. That just kind of stayed up in my mind.
All the Ville places do that. Knoxville, we used to say Knox Vegas.
Knox Vegas, there you go. Yeah. See, I'm not too far off. Yeah, I'm not that lame yet. But you did a great job on those shows. I really enjoyed listening, and I'm really fascinated by what the team looks like tonight, and we'll talk more about that later on in the podcast. But before we get into the serious nitty-gritty stuff, here at Locked On Grizzlies, we like to have a little bit of fun. And there's nothing more fun than the Grizzlies open practice that they do each and every year. They have 3-point shooting. Zach Edey did the Dougie for some reason. I didn't know that was still a thing. But I mean, he did it pretty well. I was pleasantly surprised with his Dougie skills.
I don't know, Joey.
You have to understand who's critiquing the Dougie.
Okay. I got you.
Now, if we're,
John Wall was in DC doing the Dougie. He put the Dougie on the map over there.
Right. He certainly was no John Wall, but if I am envisioning a 7'4", 290-pound man,
you give him a good grade.
Doing the Dougie, he did better at it than I anticipated. I'm not saying that he would win a contest in Washington DC or Memphis, Tennessee, or anywhere in between, but it was cool to see them having fun. I think that the reason I wanted to lead off with this in the show today is so much of the last 18 months has been not fun, right? So much negativity, so many questions about what this team is. Has the window already closed from national pundits that know what they're talking about? That's one of the things that makes me nervous. When people like Mark Stein and Amin El-Hassan, I know you wrote about that over at the Commercial Appeal. I many moons ago was on Amin's podcast, like over a decade ago. He would not remember me, but I did do that show, and he knows his stuff. He knows basketball, and it's not so easy to just completely write off the Mark Steins and Amin El-Hassans of the world. They know what they're talking about, and I think one of the biggest layers to this, and again, you know how I love a good story and narrative. How much can the joy of just enjoying being around each other and playing basketball again? Because that most certainly was lost. It felt like a job a lot last year. That was not the vibe around this team the previous 2 seasons when they were winning 56 games. Even in the playoffs, they were enjoying themselves. It's going to look different because it kind of has to with all that's transpired. But I'm really happy to see Ja Morant being excited and jumping up and down on the sidelines and They just seem in a different headspace. And that was my biggest takeaway. Open practice is designed to be for the fans and be fun, but they seem like they're genuinely enjoying one another again and being around each other. And that is going to do wonders for them, I think.
Yeah. Ja wasn't even at open practice last year.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that?
Yeah.
He wasn't there.
He was not allowed to because of a league suspension.
And Gigi Jackson was the only rookie. So, even like people love the rookie dance competition, but Gigi was by herself. And then this year, just from the fun standpoint, you had Jaylen Wells, you had Cam Spencer doing the Macarena, dance out there. You had
very on brand, by the way. Like we don't have to go too in depth with why the brand is strong there, but that is a very strong.
Yeah. I was not surprised.
As a washed white guy, I was very impressed with the Macarena there for sure.
Yeah, but how about Yuki Karamura? He come out there, he did pulled out the dance moves, and then he does the gritty after that. And just real quick on him, because since we're talking about the fun, like he's this guy, Japanese guy, 5'8" point guard, and doesn't speak a lot of English. I've talked to him in English a little bit before. Doesn't speak a lot of English. But he does, he said Ja Morant's really fast. He's talked about guarding those guys, but he's kind of one of those like guys who energizes the group. Like he's brought some energy over there, and on top of him as the rookie, Zach Edey, of course, from a basketball standpoint, has brought this confidence around the Grizzlies. Like, oh, we gotta, they like what he brings to the table. But Jaylen Wells, man, you talk about a guy who's starting to really come out of a shell. We're starting to see it with him. I mean, when he first got here, and of course, he just first got here, didn't really know anybody. I remember, he's real, just real chill and whatnot. But you're starting to see, his personality come out. And I think a good example of that was when in the skills competition and to win it against Jay Huff, when he shot his final 3-pointer, he turned around, gave him a little Steph Curry vibes, turned around before the shot went in. And I mean, we'll see how all that translates to the floor. But I mean, I'm looking at Jaylen Wells' confidence. And you know how much I talk about confidence, because I don't care how good you are. If you get on the floor with Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, and Jaren Jackson Jr., you feel like you don't belong, you're going to play like you don't belong. If you get on the floor, and like I said, if Desmond Bane passes you the ball and you're wide open and you're like, oh, Jaren has a mismatch inside, let me go to him, and you turn down an open shot, then your stats are going to reflect, passing up those type of opportunities. But with all that being said, it was super fun. Open practice. It was quick because the Grizzlies had a turnaround. They had to get to Dallas for the game and whatnot, but fun. So there was no scrimmage this year because of that, but all the competitions were fun. The trick shot stuff, Marcus Smart loves some trick shots. Ja Morant was really pouring in some half court shots. Like dude's got some range, when he really winds backs and lock in, on those deep 3-pointers. But yeah, I'm with you, Joe. Like I said, a year ago, Ja Morant wasn't there. Gigi Jackson was the only rookie. It was just a little bit different vibes, of course. But now I think Marcus Smart was hurt last year. He didn't participate in it. Just a little bit different this year. I think Vince Williams wasn't there this year, under the weather, whatever the case may be. But other than that, all the players were there. They look happy. They're engaged with each other. You're starting to see those rookies, like I said, with Jaylen Wells, come out of their shells a little bit. And more than anything, you're a day closer to seeing what this group looks like on the floor.
Jaylen Wells and Yuki, spoiler alert, are two guys that I'm going to talk about later on in the show. I'm really interested to see how both of them perform for very different reasons. And that's a solid little teaser.
I like that.
Folks around, hopefully.
There you go.
I'm excited for very different reasons for both of those guys. I am curious how they interact with one another, because again, what Zach Kleiman and Taylor Jenkins and this Grizzlies front office and this coaching staff, they very clearly have a type, right? We've talked about that before. The fact that, your former co-host, former colleague of mine over at Grizzly Bear Blues, Sean Coleman, one of his biggest claims to fame is that he's kind of figured it out, right? Like he's kind of figured out statistically what their type is. And then they also have a very clear, chip on your shoulder type of player as well. They come from different walks of life, right? They're all very different people. Like to go from Cam Spencer to Ja Morant and for those two dudes to be on the same team, what do they have in common? Well, they actually have a lot in common if you go into their backstories in basketball, coming up from nothing to get what they got what they've gotten looks very different, but the mentality is still the same. And I think that that's one of the common threads with these guys that's going to be really fun to watch. And that's how you build a culture, and that's how you build a climate that you're hoping is conducive to winning. And that's what you need in a small market like Memphis. We've talked about that before too. Like Kevin Durant's not coming here, right? LeBron James isn't leaving Bronny behind in LA to come be a free agent signing for the Memphis Grizzlies. That's just not realistic. You can make fun of me and be mad at me about that if you want, but this isn't Miami, right? This isn't New York. This isn't those types of spots. What it can be, though, is a place where you build something that maybe eventually people want to be a part of. And I do see that reestablishing itself, which is exciting for me at least. Let Damichael and I know what you guys are thinking. Were you excited? Were you at open practice? Did you see anything that maybe you want Damichael and I to talk about on a future episode? We'd be happy to discuss it. Hit us up either in the comments or on X. Damichael's at Damichael C, and I am at Joe Mullinax. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by BetterHelp. Halloween is upon us, right? And there's a lot of things that can scare you this time of year. For me, it's bees. I don't know about you, Damichael, but I am terrified of bees. I see a bee and I'm taking off. I'm not afraid of zombies or ghosts or ghouls. It is very much.
That makes sense, though. You're a married man. You're a married man. You got to keep the honeys away, you know?
Nah, I like that. If you're afraid of the honeys or bees, therapy is a great tool for facing your fears and finding ways to overcome them. Because sometimes the scariest thing is not facing our fears in the first place and holding ourselves back. If you're thinking of starting therapy, you should give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Fill out a brief questionnaire, get matched with a licensed therapist, and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Overcome your fears with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. Damichael, you were a very busy man over the last several days, partially my fault with my busy time of year with football. But you did a great job, as I mentioned earlier, hosting. You wrote a ton of great pieces for the Commercial Appeal. I'm guessing you didn't catch this, or if you did, you probably moved past it because it was a silly rumor. But you know me, right? Like one of the reasons we work so well together is when I see a silly rumor, my eyes widen. Right?
Yeah,
like you keep scrolling like a logical human and I zoom in like an illogical person that I am. So anyway, I saw, and I want to reemphasize, I don't even remember where I saw this. It was just literally a post.
That was some reporter, a reporter.
It was a reporter. Okay. Well, that makes me feel a little bit better because it just gave me a thought exercise. That's all. So at least it's semi-relevant. The New York Knicks potentially being interested in Marcus Smart. Now, Tom Thibodeau is the head coach there. If you were to build Marcus Smart or a perfect prototype player for Tom Thibodeau, Marcus Smart's probably in the mix. He fits the mold. And there's been rumors and reports that we're not going to necessarily substantiate here. It just seems like the fit with Smart on the court has not always been clean, right? And maybe you can put it better than me, partner, on that front. I think it's hard to say that because we've only seen 9 legitimate games of that fit. But you see rumblings, you hear things about Smart and Memphis not clicking completely, maybe the way they had hoped. I was intrigued by this simply because I love Josh Hart. I think Josh Hart is he would be the greatest Grizzlies basketball player in terms of just a Memphis Grizzly, right? Like obviously John Morant is better, and you could probably make an argument several other players would be better, but just the way that Hart plays, he's like super Tony Allen, right? In a lot of ways, especially as a rebounder. I would want Josh Hart, and all it takes is a 30-second trip to the trade machine to see that doesn't really work. You're not sure who would send out the picks in that case. I'm sure the Knicks would think that Memphis would have to send picks. And to be honest with you, I feel like Memphis folks would be like, actually, the Knicks should be sending picks to us. There's not a clean fit here. It's almost certainly not going to happen. But I was just curious if you had seen that report. And again, not a lot of credence to it. We've seen Marcus Smart alongside what this team's supposed to be for about 9 games. They were 6-3 in those games. I need a larger sample size before I do anything seriously in the trade machine when it comes to Marcus Smart.
Yeah, you mentioned the fact that I didn't really put much stock into it, and that's pretty much the reason why. Because, again, as I always say, when we look at these things, my mind immediately goes, okay, well, how do you even this out? If this team is interested in Marcus Smart, what in the world could they give the Grizzlies that financially and on court performance makes sense? Couldn't think of anything. So it's there's nothing there. Now, and wording is always important, with these reports as well. And it said that the Knicks want Marcus Smart.
Right.
Never said the Grizzlies were shopping him or anything of the sort, and I have not heard anything of the sort as well. So. Yeah, with that being said, you know what, Joe, when I wake up in the morning, I want apple juice or orange juice, depending on the day of the week. And when I wake up in the morning, I want an omelet. When I eat dinner in the evening, sometimes I want fried chicken. But guess what? I don't always get what I want. So the point is that with Marcus Smart, I'm sure Tom Thibodeau, like you said, he fits the mold of what they want or need or whatever. I don't see financially how that works with the Knicks, pretty much. I mean, they just had to really penny.
They are all in.
Had to. You see, they moved those 3 contracts where they paid guys $1 above the minimum, so they could move the contracts, because that was the only way they could have made that deal work financially, with Karl Anthony Towns and Julius Randle being involved. So it's little stuff like that. They don't have the assets, I think, to facilitate this type of deals, and there's nothing over there that the Grizzlies will want in return. I saw people mentioning like, Mitchell Robinson and things like that. But no, the Grizzlies are just fine. They got their 2 bigs there. They need another big potentially for some extra depth. But Mitchell Robinson, he's going to want to play. And, that would create a tricky situation. I don't see that happening in any way, shape, or form. But I will say this. Marcus Smart, getting back to your point, just about him being in Memphis. I think there is a good relationship there. You mentioned like the rumors of people like saying, it's the imperfect fit and things like that. When I'm around those guys, like I don't sense that. Marcus Smart is blending in well. He's an older, a little bit older. He's 10 years in or whatever the case may be. But at the same time, here's something Marcus Smart told me the other day, which I thought was important, and which I think kind of goes with the point that, he's meshing well in Memphis, more so than the opposite. So I was just talking to him about the fact that, have you had those Marcus Smart moments in practice yet, right? And just about being vocal, about being a leader. And he said something that really stood out to me. I don't even think I brought this up in the recent episode when I was talking about him. He basically said that he's kind of taking a back seat in a way and allowing those younger guys, the Ja Morant, Desmond Baines, those guys to, in his word, find their voices as the leaders of this team. That is very important. It can sometimes rub a little feathers. It's just because a guy has, veteran status and all that, he comes over here like, hey, flexing his credentials around and trying to be a vocal leader on the team. As Derrick Rose said last year, those things happen organically. You got to let it flow. And Marcus Smart, taking the back seat right now, because we know he's going to talk. Marcus Smart, when I say taking the back seat, you got to realize I'm talking about Marcus Smart's version of taking the back seat. So he's still doing his talking. He's still putting in his input and whatnot. But it's more so Desmond Bain is who I've heard is talking more than anyone, which is not surprising. We've heard kind of those sort of things about Des before. But Desmond Bain is kind of leading the charge on that end, and then a bunch of other players are contributing as well. Everyone's talking from what I've been told. But, yeah, Marcus Smart, I think he's meshing well.
I would agree. And I'm intrigued by a couple of things. First, quick side note, like on a Monday, are you an orange juice guy or an apple juice guy? Like, what did you drink this morning?
I drank apple juice this morning. It depends on the breakfast too. Now, like if I'm eating eggs is a orange juice thing for me. Like,
gotcha. Okay. Interesting.
But if it's like a little bit more, I guess protein heavy, then I'm going apple juice. I don't know. It's just a little vibe thing. That's all.
I eat a yogurt and a turkey sausage and egg white sandwich every morning. Literally the exact same thing. It probably surprises no one.
That is the most Joe Mullinax thing that's been said today. You have a cup of water with it?
A cup of coffee, a little bit of creamer in the coffee. Okay, yeah. But anyway, I'm intrigued by what you said about Smart taking a back seat, because that was oftentimes one of the problems in Boston. Right?
Yeah.
Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum feeling like they couldn't be the leader because it was Marcus Smart's team. He was such a dominant force a dominant personality. It reminds me of Dylan Brooks here in Memphis. Marcus Smart maybe saw himself as something more in Boston than what he was in reality. And him moving on has helped him be like, okay, this isn't my team. It's their team. I need to fit in. Dylan Brooks did it in a different way, right? There was a sign and trade, but it was technically a free agent signing. And Dylan Brooks saw himself as a core piece. You've reported that. I saw that with my own eyes. Now in Houston, that's not the case, right? And he still is himself, but he has definitely seemed to tone down a little bit on the grandiose statements. And he's not pulling on Superman's cape or spitting into the wind like he was before. I think that's an interesting dynamic to keep an eye on as things progress here. And shout out to apple juice. Maybe I'll drink an apple juice. Yeah. Maybe I'll drink an apple juice on Tuesday morning. We'll see. Let us know. Again, hit us up on X or in the comments how you feel about this Marcus Smart trade. I don't want to trade him at any point right now. It doesn't sound like Damichael does either. Let us know what you guys are thinking and hit us up there. And make sure you're also hitting up Locked On NBA. After this episode is over, we still have a preview of tonight's game to go. But let us know in the comments if you are feeling Locked On NBA. I enjoy the show. I know Damichael does as well. We should be on there here coming up soon. Season previews are coming up. Let us know what you think of the show. They do a great job covering the entire league with a small town kind of feel. Big fan of Locked On NBA, and I think if you guys give it a shot, you will too. So check out Locked On NBA when you're done with Locked On Grizzlies today. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season, of course, is in full swing, and you can continue to chug through the season with a big return on FanDuel. That's America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you know what my hunch is always going to be, partner. Although I know the Green Bay Packers, they had a pretty good weekend this past weekend
we did.
As well. But nobody's playing better than my boy Jayden Daniels right now. He's the best quarterback in football. The best quarterback in football, baby. Plays for the Washington Commanders. And if you have a hunch in an upcoming game that you think he's going to show that once again, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Make sure you're checking that out over at FanDuel. Again, that's FanDuel.com. There's a basketball game tonight, partner. Again, kind of, right?
What?
A basketball game. Yeah, they're playing basketball. Like, we don't have to talk about breakfast foods anymore. Like, we can actually get into the – now, don't get me wrong. I love talking about breakfast food. Just food in general. I'm a huge food guy. Locked On food. Maybe we need to do a spinoff here at some point. Next off season. Obviously, a chance to watch them actually play some basketball. It's not going to be the same. You've reported that you expect the team, the starters, the key players, maybe 20 minutes, give or take. Ja Morant puts up 12 points and 7 assists in 10 minutes. Maybe Taylor Jenkins just says, I've seen enough. I'm good. But it sounds like about 20 minutes is the goal for those key guys. And I mentioned earlier in the show that I was interested in two guys in particular in this game, Yuki and Jaylen. Mm-hmm. And the reason I'm interested in those two guys, again, for very different reasons. When it comes to Wells, we talk a lot about Jake LaRavia. We talk a lot about John Conchar, unfortunately. There's names that get brought up as that end-of-rotation guy with G.G. Jackson and Vince Williams Jr. out to start the season. If Wells shoots the ball as well as you make him out to do, right, I think that is something to keep an eye on. Because we know Tayshaun Prince was kind of the driving force in his selection. Clearly, there is some sort of talent that has caught Prince's eye. Prince has a pretty good eye for talent. I think everybody would agree with that at this stage of his tenure here in Memphis as a front office guy. I'm interested in watching him over the preseason. I think a LaRavia or Conchar is probably the front runner at this stage for that job. Don't count out Wells yet. I really want to see what he does in these minutes, especially when he does have those rare opportunities to be next to a Morant, a Bane, or a Jackson Jr. Yuki, I want to watch just because novelty is not the right word. But the fact that he's 5'8", I hope that he plays next to Edie at some point. I think he's pretty clearly going to be a guy that's on the Memphis hustle, right? I don't think anybody envisages him winning that final spot or the 14th roster spot. But he is a good facilitator of the basketball. And again, a simple Google search and YouTube search, you'll see some pretty impressive passes from this guy. He understands the flow of the game, certainly much faster at the NBA level, and he might have some issues with that. But I'm curious to watch him, how he compensates for his size, how he gets to the basket that dribble penetration, even with the new look offense. I'm sure that'll still be a component. How he fits within that scheme. Again, probably going to be a G League player, but it's still going to be fun to see compared to the other pieces around him what he's capable of doing.
Yeah, I think both of those players are ones that I'm going to keep an eye on too. But I'm going to keep this simple, though, and I'm going to say two things, but I'm kind of mesh them into one.
Sure.
And that's the new offense, and that's Zach Edey. Those are the two things by far and large that I want to see in this first game. Number one, because Taylor Jenkins told us on yesterday that they're not gonna hold anything back. Ooh. So what you're gonna see is what you're gonna see. In terms of what this new offense, there won't be any, we just only
save it for the regular season.
Yeah. And it doesn't really work that way in basketball for the most part. Like this is not football where, you can just vanilla, HB dives, and save the tricky stuff and all that. But it's not really like that. There's only so much you can do on a basketball floor. But at the same time, what the Grizzlies kind of have in mind, which I want to kind of explain to people a little bit, just short here, then we'll get to Zach Edey, is like what you're going to see is not going to be like a bunch of fancy plays, ran. It's not going to be something overcomplicated like Dan Hurley, likes to, do 3 to 4 different plays off of different actions and looks or whatever the case may be. That's kind of not what you're going to get. You're going to get something, it's supposed to be designed around the idea of being free-flowing, a positionless type of basketball. So you're going to see a lot of guys grab the rebound and start the offense. Probably not Zach Edey, but for the most part, guys are going to be grabbing the board. Marcus Smart's going to start some offense, potentially Desmond Bane and John Morant. Now, John Morant will eventually get back onto the ball, but I want to see how much is he going to be off the ball in those situations. Now, with that being said, and kind of transition into Zach Edey, with that new offense, the main thing that they've been emphasizing, and if it's not the main thing, it is one of the 3 main things for sure, and that's pace. Pace. That's not new around here. The Grizzlies, in those 2 seasons where they won 50-plus games, they were top of the league in transition scoring. That's what they do, especially when you got John Morant, you got downhill Dez, and those dudes, getting up the floor. You're going to be a decent, at least, scoring team in the transition. But here's how that works with Zach Edey. When we talk to Taylor Jenkins, and I mentioned this on one of our previous shows as well, the idea that Taylor Jenkins basically said that he feels like Zach Edey is moving up the floor, getting up and down better than he surprised him. He's surprised at how good he's been getting up and down the floor. Joe, I know that was one of the concerns, big 7'4" guy, 290 pounds. How will he be able to transition from one end of the court to the next end of the court? Well, guess what? This right here is the best possible, in my opinion, first example of can he do that? Because Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford, those boys get up and down. Like I was talking to a couple of the reporters in Dallas, and there's no question in Dallas about, is Daniel Gafford going to be able to keep up with the likes of Kyrie Irving or whatever the case may be? And Derek Lively, I mean, he can run. So if Zach Edey can hold his own from a pace standpoint, and I want to see what his minute distributions look like, because if he's playing 3-4 minutes, then going to the bench because he's huffing and puffing, trying to keep up with Derek Lively, that's notable. But if he's holding his own, he's not getting lazy on defense because he's tired and things like that. I can't wait to see how Zach Edey plays, because those are 2 good bigs. We know that Dallas won't have Luka. For those who are unaware, Luka Doncic is out in Dallas right now, so you won't see Luka. But still, we'll see who's available for Dallas. Should be some decently good players, and I'm hopeful that Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford, or one of them at least, will play, and we can see, that Zach Edey theory, or whatever you want to call it, kind of be put to the test early on.
Preseason is kind of like summer league for me, where I could care less who the opponent is usually. But yeah, you make a great point there, partner. That is the biggest question for me with Edey. I could care less if he shoots threes. That doesn't bother me. The way that he sets screens, the type of different ways of getting the spacing, right? Yeah, this idea of spacing. There's so many different ways that you can do it. He creates space through the screens that he sets. Mm-hmm. What I am most interested in is if his conditioning can hold up. And we talk about him like he's some big fat guy sometimes, right? And I'll say either I hear analysis that talks about him like that, or I myself am like, yeah, he's 7'4", 290 pounds. I think I made a joke last week about not finding good Memphis restaurants.
Yeah, the eating.
Yeah, like he played, I'm fairly sure, I don't have it in front of me, almost the entire national championship game, if not the entire game. And who was the starting center?
Well conditioned.
Donovan Clingan, I believe was his name. And that's another athletic, young, big, maybe not quite as able to run as Gafford or Lively, but he's no slouch in that area himself. He played almost the entire game. So his conditioning at the college level was elite, especially for his size. How does that translate to the NBA, especially in a scenario where he's not going to be asked to play 48 minutes a game? It's going to be 25 to 30. Is he able to change the way that he uses his body to, 5-minute spurts, right? 5-minute spurts of effort, and then he gets those breaks. Because again, moving 7'4", 290 pounds, even if you're in shape like Zach Edey is, 7'4", 290 pounds, that's still not easy to do. That's still a lot of size in a basketball game playing against, in my opinion, the greatest athletes on the planet and NBA players. That's a pretty seismic shift. So it's going to be our first chance to kind of take a look at that. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you guys so much for being with us on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. We'll be back together on our Tuesday show, talking Grizzlies, Mavs, and so much more. Damichael, I know you're looking forward to the game. Lots of different angles we can take coming out of preseason game number 1.
Yeah, again, Zach Edey, that's number 1 for me. I want to see how he fares in this offensive system that emphasizes pace. If you're a traditionalist or you have an old school mindset in basketball, that's the reason you talked about the critics earlier, Joe, the Kristen Peaks or Amin Elhassan and the people who have said that they don't see the fit. One reason people don't really see the fit because the Grizzlies do want to get up and down. And you think, historically speaking, the teams that like to get up and down the most are more like small ball oriented. But the Grizzlies are doing it in a different way. And I'm interested to see that in this first game. But just them playing basketball again. And, at the end of the day, that's what it's going to come down to. Seeing Ja Dez in that backcourt again and all the other things as well. The rookies getting their first playing time. Then even the E10 guys, Yuki, Armando Bacot, and the rest of that group.
Richmond stand up, Armando Bacot. I'm excited to watch him play, and hopefully he has a good showing and he can put himself in the conversation. They do need depth at the big man positions, so Bacot might be a fun one to keep an eye on. I'm just saying, keep an eye. You want to talk about a low ceiling? It probably doesn't get lower in terms of ceiling than Armando Bacot, but the guy knows what he's good at, and I think you're going to see flashes of that in the game tonight. Make sure you're with us tomorrow talking about the game and so much more here on Locked On Grizzlies. And make sure once this episode ends, you're checking out Locked On NBA. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe wherever you get podcasts. Check us out on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, literally anywhere you get a podcast. Become an everydayer to Locked On Grizzlies and be with Damichael and I as the season gets fully underway. For Damichael Cole of the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee, I am Joe Mullinax. Stay locked in. Enjoy Grizzlies basketball. The vibes aren't quite immaculate yet, but I feel like we're getting close to immaculate. Maybe we'll take another step there tonight. We'll catch you next